Many thanks for being here and choosing News Central. My name is Felicity Ezewuike. Top battery. It sits at the center of the global transition to cleaner energy. The International Energy Agency says global demand is only going to rise as electric vehicles and renewable energy storage expand. Now, Africa already supplies over 40,000 tons of it a year. And this is also expected to rise to 500,000 tons in a few more years. That's a lot of money. And the hustle, as they say in this area, is real. Landing in some of the most dangerous ground on the continent of Africa: Nigeria, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Chad. These are countries already fighting insurgencies where the state does not seem to fully control all of its own territories. The new research I mentioned is from a PhD candidate at King's College London, Bradley Morton. He found that Boko Haram and the Islamic State West Africa province are already exploiting weak oversight of lithium. Their war chests and gold are reportedly moving into lithium country with the same playbook: tax the miners, control the roads, and charge for protection. It is a story Africa has lived through before. Diamonds bankrolled civil wars in Sierra Leone and Angola. Gold has funded armed groups across West Africa for over a decade. Oil wealth, we know, fuel corruption and instability in Nigeria. Not just Nigeria, we have Angola and Libya. So the question before us in One Slot today is, will Africa's roads and industry to Bonn International Center for Conflict Studies? He joins us from Bonn, Germany. Dr. Ikenna Okonkwo is Senior Analyst, SBM Intelligence. He is here in Lagos. Temitope, Olodo, CEO and Managing Director, Traz Intelligence and Security Solutions. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here with us. Let's start with you, Dr. Oginni. Please re-impress on us why lithium is such a big deal globally at the moment and what is driving the surge for the demand.
Thank you very much. As you could see, that quite a lot of countries are trying to transit, towards renewable energy and clean energy. And the demand for clean energy technology, defense technology, and others are actually increasingly driving demand for lithium. Not just only among the major power like China, US, and others, but it's also more importantly, even within Europe also, which is rapidly moving towards clean energy. And that's a very important point. The war in Ukraine and in Russia play a major role in seeking for a kind of increased security investment in defense, which is also driving a critical search for rare mineral, and as you can see also. So these all together are also raising the consumption of this item, if I may call it. And this is very important. But it's not just only that. At the local level, of course, things that are discovered over time and now become usable and a rare commodity, then it's also increasingly being sought after, not just only by legitimate actors, but also non-state armed group and others who want to leverage that, as they've done in the Togoma region, bordering Benin, Mali, and Niger. And we also have other items within the Northwest region where we have critical minerals, which are also becoming another point of contest.
Dr. Okonkwo, the current lithium producers are Chile, Australia, and China. But Africa's output is projected to grow sharply by 2030. How significant is the Sahel's role in that shift, realistically?
One of the largest lithium discoveries in Africa, in fact, second to a discovery in DR Congo, is in a place And there are also significant lithium deposits in Nigeria that we know of, and all around the Sahel, because it has in the DR Congo, it's a similar geology you find in Nigeria, where you have the same kind of rocks. It's also a similar geology to what you find where you have the largest lithium deposits, or the largest lithium production, which is in Australia. So these places or these deposits were known for other minerals in the past, like tin, columbites, and some of the rare earth minerals. But currently or recently, lithium has grown in its demand, obviously due to its use in batteries, its use in electric vehicles, especially as countries are transitioning into green energy and trying to phase out fossil fuel burning cars, for instance. And this is where one of the major players in the lithium processing supply chain comes in, which is China. And China is playing a large role in lithium mining and lithium processing in West Africa, and especially in Sahel.
Something ordinarily one would think is, having this kind of mineral, one would think is, does anything rather make lithium different from those earlier resource booms?
Yes. We know from our understanding of how the terrorist group have been involved in the issue of gold, that could create the blueprint for them in what they might want to do with lithium. Of course, they do not have a commercial mining location like you mentioned earlier during your intro. What they would, of course, do is control the ecosystem around those mining environment and get involved in taxation of miners, protection payments, involvement in smuggling, control of transportation corridor. If there's any lessons that leaders could learn from information that is being put out by PhD researchers and other organizations that work in this environment, is that we need to now quickly move into that environment to ensure that those kind of vulnerabilities, which might make them, gain grants, just like the PhD researcher was saying, does not exist. They need to be taken out of that environment, not to be if those areas are ungoverned space. And we've seen it in Nigeria, because some areas are ungoverned spaces, and there are mineral deposits there, then definitely these terrorists will want to take advantage of it. But it's important to also highlight that while you could carry gold and break it down into your pocket, you can't do that with, lithium. And moreover, lithium needs a lot of industrial capability to be able to use it. And that's the reason why we really need to start talking about it, especially in Africa, because there's a lot of undiscovered mapping or data mapping of what we really have. There is estimation of what we have, but nobody knows, because we've not actually started digging down to find the reality of what we really have. And we know this is going to be the gold of the future, because I use an electric car. Most people are switching to electric car because petrol is unreliable, and there's a lot of conflict, as we could see with Iran and American war. So that is the direction of travel at the moment. So government in Africa need to start working on ensuring that the terrorists do not see any vulnerability or loophole there to take advantage of it.
You mentioned PhD researchers. We know that there are most of them researchers generally tracking the region, and they have found that armed groups increasing. I'm staying with you, Mr. Olodo. That armed groups increasingly target roads, communities, and commercial hubs within 10 to 20 kilometers of mining sites. How does an armed group turn control of a mine or a trade route into real revenue?
Oh, it's very simple. You see, they take advantage of the lack of institutions, strong institutions, and opportunities. All these countries like Australia, they have those mining places. And remember that we're talking about Namibia. Namibia also has, lithium, and they've got other materials, but we've not heard of terrorism in those environments. Botswana has gold or diamonds. We've not heard of terrorist incidents in those particular areas. It all depends on the leadership of the government of the day in those countries, and how they take security, how serious they take security. If they play lip service on security like we've seen, especially in the West Africa and the Sahel area, then we're going to have problem in our hands. The bottom line is that whether you go to Osun State where they're having gold mine, or even every incident, and my brother here, their organization have come up with reports, my company have come up with reports too, where you look at incidents that are happening where there's a lot of killing or they're driving people out of their community, is because there's something under the ground that those terrorists want or those individuals want. And that's the reason why they do what they do. Now, it is for government to do the mapping, to understand where materials are, the hotspot areas, and ensure that resources are moved into those places, strategic redeployment of security services to ensure safety and security of those communities, to ensure that there are no remote communities within, because they budget money every year, and yet we don't know what is happening to those monies that have been given to develop those communities.
Dr. Oginni, in Burkina Faso, jihadist groups are reportedly using informal mining networks to raise money and deepen local influence. How does controlling a single mine translate into control over an entire community? Perhaps you could walk us through, how they do this so effectively that government is still yet to, manage kind of control.
Thank you very much. I think I will not go far from Nigeria, then I will go to Burkina Faso, because I was somewhere in Kwara State. Maybe you've heard about the incidents that happened in Kayama in Kwara State. That was February, precisely February 11. I was then February 14. What is important to know is that when we're analyzing the armed group that actually carry out that operation, which is Mahmudawa group, you can call them Ansaru group, I was tracking the movement of one of the leaders who actually engage in this sort of things. Right from Kebbi to Sokoto, they move in the direction and down to Bagudu local government in Kebbi. And then they went and visited, that's the Lakurawa group, visited the Mahmudawa group to carry out that large-scale operation. But then when I was in Bagudu Axis, then I asked a few questions. There were a few people that were actually transported from Arit. Arit is an Iranian site in Niger. So, and when they were actually transported to North Central, their goal is just basically to help in the mining. So because they've been doing that quite a long time in the Iranian control area, even by the armed group and others in Niger. So when they came to Kwara State, the operation is that they will help them for mining, but then they gave them almost a million CFA. Maybe that would translate close to, maybe around 2 million plus in Naira. So at the end of the day, when they came and they arrived to that territory, they gave them weapons. So not just mining, just to give you an idea of how that happened. Take them to they radicalize them as much as they can, and then they put them to this side to work. The second point is they don't usually also, if they don't have this manpower, they make use of the artisanal miner. They control the artisanal miner and say, look, you are coming out, you're going to do this one, you give us a certain percentage, then you can operate. I was somewhere in Castina side, where I was having some interviews 1 year ago, and then I asked, but you have a company operating in this area, but the community cannot stay there, but the company can operate safely. How do they operate? If there's no a kind of alliances or establishment that have happened that allow this armed group to actually stay there, and then the people can continue mining. So this is the approach that they take. And then the second point is that our cross-border area is there unmanned, and we have this large-scale vast land that we are not controlling. If you look from KB side, from KB, you can go through the forest down to Mali. If you look at the river Niger, it stretches right from that side down to Mali side. All those forest areas, these are the maze where they control, but they are not just forests, they are trans-border area for trade, for others. So the more armed group equip themselves to control these assets, the more they can control whatever that comes out of it. And that is why you can see in the Tagoma region, which the Oginni actually control much of the gold around that side, they were able to get it and they export it somehow to some country. So, and the question is, how did that happen? And that is why we are saying that the African Union, the ECOWAS, they need to establish a governance framework that we're able to, have a kind of mineral governance, and of course, have an intelligence sharing that could help across the border to track what is going on and what is going out. Then we need to go deeper about do we really map this area, or do we have to rely on outsiders to map these resources? And if they do, how much can we say that which company actually mine what? What is the level of production? What is the volume? Transparently putting this in place so that people can track them. I think this is also one way that we can deal with situations. According to the estimates, as my colleague said, we cannot completely accurately say how much, but it's estimated that Nigeria, through maybe Northwest and North Central and some part of Southwest, can actually have up to $15 billion from the lithium resources. So, and as much as in Mali, which actually will be second largest one in Africa, if not the largest over time, they could earn as much as $10 billion. So, but the issue has to do with the small artisanal mining. And what is important is that they have this sort of small, you can take a small volume of it, but of high value, and that make it easy for smuggling. So this is also another point that we have to highlight. Thank you.
Some of the questions I haven't even asked, which is very great. Thank you very much, because I'm told we're going to wrap in 30 minutes. It's against an hour because we have a live program to go over to. Dr. Okonkwo, however, I want you to speak more on the claims. Nigerian officials have said profits from illegal mining are helping armed militia groups operating in the north. Do we have a clear enough pictures of exactly which groups benefit and how directly, and what in your thoughts are being done, if anything, to help address the situation?
Well, one thing that is very, very clear is that a lot of the bandit groups, especially in the north central states, I would say Zamfara especially being the epicenter, a lot of their income comes from the control of artisanal gold mines. And now, regarding solutions, I think the first thing is to understand what the problem is. So whether it is diamonds, gold, lithium, and these things being a resource cost, the key issue is state capacity, the capacity of the state to exert sovereignty, especially in the rural areas where these mines are found. So that's one thing. Another thing is we need to emphasize, especially since our topic is about lithium, that there's a big difference mineral that is pushing conflict in the Sahel. The thing about gold is that gold is found why it's easier for artisanal mining or small-scale mining to take place regarding gold. And it's easy for terrorist groups to collect gold, the gold itself, and sell. So that becomes a source of income. But when it comes to lithium, lithium requires a lot of processing in order to get it to its final product. And most of that processing isn't done here. And I would say that leads to a possible solution. In many African countries, in Nigeria, for example, same thing in the Congo Democratic Republic, and also in Mali, and many African countries are learning from this. One thing that they have started doing is not allowing mining permits without building processing facilities. Now, how does that help matters? Once companies begin to build processing facilities, for example, there's a Chinese company that is building a processing facility that is connected to the major discovery in Mali. There's already a processing facility that was established in Endo in Nasarawa State that the Vice President commissioned a few weeks ago. What that does is that these processing facilities require heavy investment. So before that heavy investment happens, it will force countries like Nigeria, Mali, Burkina Faso to invest in this capacity to protect those facilities. And what that leads to in the end is, and this is what has to happen, especially with mining in Africa, is that we need to move from the artisanal model, which makes it easier for terrorist groups to control and exert control, to the formal to informal level, to formalize the whole process, to know who is doing what, and to have some form of registration and to formalize the system. And this is what would lead us, first of all, to control the mining areas and also to get the most value from the lithium supply process.
Okay, I'll come back to you, Dr. Oginni. I'm just trying to see if I can get the best questions out. Zimbabwe is phasing in a ban on exporting raw, unprocessed lithium. A full ban takes effect in January of 2027, specifically to force miners to build processing plants at home. Early 2026 figures showed lithium revenues climbing sharply, even though the country still has only one processing plant fully operational. Could a model like that work in a country like Mali or Niger, where the core problem is security, not just economics?
Yeah, thank you very much. If you look at Mali, you will see that the government in power is trying its best to actually even control its gold. And this is a good example. If you go and observe in the last few months, I think Mali is estimated to have around $50 billion from its gold. And in the last few months, Mali has generated quite a lot because there's a sort of reform that actually took place, and that also the revisit who get licensed and what need to produce, and exactly that's what happened. If you go and study Mali right now, you will see that Mali is getting more from its gold than before. It's a result of this sort of restriction and centralized process, which I think is upheld. So that will also translate, if you look at the places like Zimbabwe, it's going to happen, because if you ban the raw production, raw extraction, export of that, then what it means is that you have to create an alternative. So if that would translate into, establishing more processing plants, then that would be great. Okay. And that will also create a kind of value chain. But I wanted to say something, if you talk about that, it's not just only the licensing that matter, but how do we transparently actually address who owns, who gets license, the ownership, and how public can access this. Right. This is very important. Secondly, I wanted to say the aspect of traceability and due diligence. All right. From the pits down to the production stage, there has to be a kind of transparency that will enable us to track where does something come from and where is it going. All right. I'm sorry, we're pressed for time. Mr. Olodo, realistically, how much can regulation or even formalization achieve while insurgencies remain active and large parts of these countries sit outside of government control?
It's important. I think that's the only solution that is visible for us in Africa. If we are really serious about controlling our resources and making sure that the benefit is enjoyed by all. We must make sure that there is governance structure in place. Just like my other colleagues have mentioned, ensure that the processing is done in Africa. Okay. Follow the money. If we follow the money, treat the mining corridors as critical national infrastructure, formalize the process, don't allow criminals to get into it, map the mines, not just say, oh, we have mines here, map it, let's know what we have on the underground before we even start the process of giving out the license in the first place.
All right, Dr. Okonkwo, as briefly as you can, what is the one decision by an African government or a regional body or even the international companies buying this lithium that needs to happen in the next, say, 12 months to tip the balance in the right direction? As quickly as you can, please.
Well, I think for the companies will go where the profits are. So the question is for governments, and governments have to realize that the insurgency problem is an existential one and something that cannot be handled with the kid gloves that it has been handled with so far, especially in some countries like Mali and Burkina Faso. It has to be seen for what it is.
All right, Dr. Oginni, your final thoughts, please, quickly.
Critical mineral is a national security. And I think the more we see it as a national security and we have to take it more seriously, I think the better for African nation, the better for the government, the better for the people. And critical minerals must serve the people.
Mr. Olodo.
Yes, security threat is not just simply, terrorists digging lithium themselves. We need to look at the whole ecosystem and find a way to ensure that Africa really enjoys the benefit of their raw materials and use it for the next industrialization that is coming ahead.
Dr. Okonkwo, thank you very much for being here. Dr. Oginni, thank you. And Mr. Olodo, thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure's on mine. Thank you.